from the BBC to NBC, from catwalks to royal families, from the White House to the National Institutes of Health, from universities to community centers. I have had the privilege of talking about neurodiversity, about autism, about differently wired kinds of wonderful around the world. And whether the audience has been 800 people in a room or an intimate email between me and someone who's been there or read a book or just had a question, it wows me that the same 3 need-to-knows pop up, regardless of the formality of the environment, regardless of whether you're a parent, whether you're asking about yourself, whether you're a professional, whether you're asking about your partner. It doesn't matter. And maybe that makes sense, because after all, before and after everything, we are all on the human spectrum, aren't we? So it is my privilege right now to thank you for sharing your connecting information with me so that we can stay in touch, so that I can tell you about the resources, the adventures, and quite frankly, the love that is waiting for you. So much information, so many good people, and so much just great stuff. And as my thank you, here are the answers to those top 3 questions, just between you and me. How important is the diagnosis? This is probably the most frequently asked question around the globe, no matter the audience. I suspect, I'm wondering if. How important is an autism or spectrum diagnosis? And the answer is, it depends. I'm sorry I can't be more straightforward, but I can hone in right here. Ready? It depends on why the information matters and how it's going to be used. So it's not so much that a diagnosis, or let me pause. I really like to use the word identification. I mean, I get the idea that we're talking about a medical thing because we're talking about parts of our bodies. So, okay, yeah, brain, definitely part of the body, kind of an important one. But identified is something entirely different than diagnosed. Diagnosed is when you're talking about illness. It's what I think of when I think of my best friend whom I lost to breast cancer, or my dad whom I lost to lung cancer. You can identify your talents. You can identify the sound of your best friend's voice. You can identify the taste of your favorite flavor of ice cream. Whatever it is, identify. That can be really good. And the truth is, here's the first bit. A diagnosis, an identification, doesn't actually make you autistic. I know it's shocking, but I'll give you a little bit of an example here. When I was born, back in the days pre-ultrasounds, obviously, it was going to be a surprise whether or not I was a boy or a girl. And you would think that the first thing my mom might have said was, oh, it's a girl, or something like that. It was, she has red hair. Still do. Here's the thing, guess what? Saying she has red hair didn't make me a redhead. Saying she's a girl didn't name my gender assignment at birth, did it? Nope. That's what was. Okay, so that's the first thing to know about identification. It doesn't change who the person was yesterday or last week or a year ago. It's the same person with all the wonderfulness and, the little challenging things that sometimes feel a little bit like a grain of sand or 2 or 12 in your socks. The word is a label only as much as we need it to be in the times that we need it to be. If I go looking for the little author's room, when in fact I'm looking for the ladies' room, it's not gonna get me anywhere, is it? But author is gonna get me somewhere when I'm trying to communicate what it is that I do. It's an identifier that is specific to certain circumstances. So here's when an identification matters. And understand that in some parts of the world, the testing that does the identifying is free. It's part of healthcare. In others, it is absolutely not. And in fact, it's often very expensive. So you can sort of look to rudimentary lists. And the first one I would point you to would be both the checklist that is in Sisterhood of the Spectrum and Autism in Heels, my memoir, and a very special, we call them toe dipper, over at Belong, which is a portrait of neurodiversity. And it's like no other descriptor of what being neurodivergent looks like. Okay, so do you need to know? Do you need the identifier? You do if you're concerned about pharmacological support, academic support, or employment support. That's when it really matters. Why? Well, because there are laws. There are laws that come into play that support the education, and I need to make this point. This does not mean that a child or an adult or a young adult is struggling academically necessarily in overt, obvious ways, but you might be surprised how even the brightest kids, a little different kind of support, maybe it's attention or organizational, makes a vast difference simply in their stress levels and their anxiety. So, having that identifier, if we're talking about appropriate support legally, education-wise, that's important. Same thing goes if you're talking about making sure that you're covered under any national laws that protect your rights as someone with a different makeup. So in the American system, that is the People with Disabilities, the ADA Act, right? The Americans with Disabilities Act. And there are similar, rather than go through all the laws in the wonderful countries that I may be speaking to you in, there are similar laws around the world. Pharmacological support? Yes. Sort of. Autism, Asperger's, is not in and of itself something that we treat or need pharmacological support for. Now, there's a terrible word, comorbidity. Isn't that horrible? I say it's like freckles and red hair. They come together a whole lot of the time. Well, similarly, there's a bit of an alphabet soup. And again, I hate to keep saying it, but it's true. Over at Belong, we talk about that because it's important to understand. ADHD, ADD, OCD, GAD, ODD. There's so many Ds, right? But they're not disorders. They're just part and some of what we experience symptomatically as people whose neurology is a bit different. Whether it's sensory issues, anxiety issues, there are appropriate supports, whether that's medicinally or behaviorally in school and work, that we have the right to request only if we have a diagnosis and identification. Otherwise, seeing yourself in the lists and the portraits that I'll paint for you, if it resonates, there's a reason. Now, I'm not a physician, but I will tell you, I have never recommended someone for evaluation after reading through my lists wanted more, never, not once, and not have it come back and that be true. That be an accurate assessment. So is the diagnosis important? If you see yourself in the portrait and you don't need any of those three things, then the identification is your own to make. Because the truth is that all of the supports, all of the emotional, sensory, intellectual, anxiety supports that I can and will be proud to offer you, that the world can offer, are only ever going to make life better for everyone. The second most common question, it's this one. Am I alone? Well, I'm here to tell you you're not. I was identified as being on the spectrum after 2 out of 3 of my kids and their dad, and the third one then was identified as being on the spectrum. I have also, in my professional life, before all of this, before getting to be an author and speaker, was both a teacher and a counselor. So I think we could say I've kind of covered the gamut. If you're any of those things, parent, partner, person who sees yourself as a bit different, or a professional, you're not alone. In fact, the most beautiful thing about understanding who you are is understanding how very not alone, how very unalone, how very, well, with me anyway, how very much you may be in the rest of the world anything but typical. But around here, you're incredibly normal and typical. You see, normal and typical, they are not synonyms. I invite you to come over and check out Belong, because Belong is a community of people around the world who are real and speak to one another, who will show you in their own journeys how completely normal you are kind of normal. And that's a really legitimate life experience. Whether you're looking for resources, tips, methods to use with your own children, with your partner, with your clients, your students, or quite frankly, with yourself, all of it is just waiting for you. If I could only show you how many emails I get a week, how many messages I get a week, how many beautiful tears I have seen cried around the world when people understand that they are not alone, that there are tips, tricks, there are resources, there are anti-anxiety tools just waiting for you. There are sensory solutions that are both savvy and spectrumy, and they are waiting for you. There are friends. There are connections. There are real people who understand exactly where you are, where you've been, and better than all of that, where you can head. And you won't be doing it alone. That much I can promise. The third, and the incredibly common question that I get when everything else wraps up, when people pack up, when days come to an end, when hearts have been lifted, shattered wide open in the best of ways, when kids, teens, young adults, and old fogies like me, and where I'm headed soon, when we all have had our moments, the question is always, What now? What now? Well, the thing is that once you understand or begin to understand yourself, what not? That's the reality. I invite you to come over and sign up for the Belong wait list. There is something special going on. There are resources that I will point you to. The best-selling series in the world on autism. And I'm proud to tell you that that's mine. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Because I'm writing from where we both are. There are videos. There are jokes. There are crossword puzzles. There is fun. There is fun. There's joy. There's understanding and compassion. What now? What not now? Anything. That's what. If you worry that this is the end of the dreams you've had for yourself, and you've said, my turn's over, that's it, I'm done, then I offer you this tattoo, semicolon, and it means my story goes on for those of us who have struggled deeply and darkly. I get it. I do. As a mother, as a partner, as a married mother, a single mother, a remarried mother, and a stepmother, as a teacher of advanced students, twice exceptional, of special needs kids, of a counselor, to teens, young adults, and married adults who found themselves in situations where they were treated less than and might feel scared because they didn't realize, or perhaps forgot, what kind of miracles they actually are. You actually are. No. Your dream isn't over, whether it's for yourself or for your child. No, not at all. As long as there is love and as long as there is connection, you're not alone. And so, the journey might look a little bit different than you expected, but quite frankly, what do they say? Life is what happens when you're busy telling God your plans. Whatever your thought, understanding, belief, or hope may have been in the past about what your journey should be, will be, honestly, none of us knows what tomorrow brings. But I can tell you that your today doesn't need to be disconnected, disheartened, sad. No, not at all. For as soon as we see and understand that the door in front of us has directions, has a label that says either pull or push, we're going to stop futilely expending energy trying to make something or someone do what they're not naturally built to do. But addressed in just that right way, pushing or pulling, everything and everyone opens up wide. And what's beyond the door, that will be you, theirs, ours, mine, each of ours to decide. But what it won't be is limited, broken, or gone. Because differently wired just means different kinds of wonderful ahead.